Hello and welcome to the Integrative Health Convention 2019 online interviews. Today we're going to find out more about treating ADHD naturally, and Philippa Fibert, who's speaking at the Integrative Health Convention 2019 on the weekend of the 5th and 6th of October at the Plaza Victoria in central London this year. So this is Philippa Fibert. She's a researcher and practitioner in integrative health with particular interest in neurodevelopment disorders. She's going to come and speak to us about treating ADHD naturally. So, hi, Philippa.
Hi.
Shall we begin by letting the audience know a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Okay. Yes, I am interested in research, and I am very interested in improving health outcomes for children with neurodevelopmental disorders. So I started off my life as a teacher and working with children who'd been excluded from school or who had various educational problems, and really found that we were not able to make huge differences to their lives. And then when my own children were small, I trained as a homeopath, really with a view to managing their first aid health complaints, and found myself treating a few of my ex-pupils or children with neurodevelopmental disorders, and was really rather gobsmacked by some of the results. I wasn't expecting them, and neither were the families. That one little pill was able to do more than I'd achieved in sort of 20 years in working in education. So I started to look at why this therapy of homeopathy wasn't more widely acceptable. And that's where I really came across the whole research issue. I was told there was no evidence. So I thought, well, I better go get me some evidence. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Oh, wonderful. I was going to ask you about the story behind how you got interested in what you do, but you've just explained that.
Well, I could tell you the story, if you like, of the child that really made me want to do the research.
Oh, yes, please.
So it was while I was training and under supervision, and he was a friend of a friend's child, and he was age 9. He had a diagnosis of ADHD. He'd already tried to commit suicide. He had warts all over his hands. He had destroyed most of the house. He dug it up. He had nocturnal enuresis. He couldn't read and he couldn't write. So largely on the indication of, well, on the totality of his symptoms, but also looking at the position of his warts, because homeopathy is a very individualized therapy. I prescribed a homeopathic remedy, and we watched in absolute astonishment as all those symptoms just dissipated over the course of 3 treatments.
Mm-hmm.
And he learned to read within a month of starting treatment. So this was really rather an extraordinary result, and I wouldn't say it's always typical, but the fact that it happened led me to wonder how generally applicable this therapy might be and what we might be able to achieve.
Oh, wow. And you were going to talk about treating ADHD naturally this October at the Park Plaza at the convention. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and what the audience will gain out of it?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about the 2 studies that I've conducted so far briefly. One was a comparative case series, and the second is an RCT, a pragmatic RCT, where we looked at the treatment by homeopaths and treatment by nutritional therapists. So I'm going to use those as the kind of basis for what I'm talking about. I'm going to try to describe a little bit how homeopathy functions as a very individualized treatment, because ADHD is extremely heterogeneous, as I'm sure you all know, and it has multiple etiologies and combinations of etiologies. And what I'm going to try and show is how homeopathic treatment can use those as a basis of a prescription, and sometimes manage to actually treat those. Obviously, there's an awful lot of research that still needs to be done to make that, to kind of follow each one of those up. But I'll give some examples, and I'll give some some remedy pictures to try and explain, because it's quite complicated understanding how homeopathy works when you haven't been trained in it, and it's such a different paradigm from a conventional medicine approach, where, for example, most children would get either a pharmaceutical medication and or a behavioral intervention, which would generally be very standardized. And the issue with homeopathy is that it's not standardized, but I think it's very appropriate to this very heterogeneous condition. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So having thought about the Integrative Health Convention, where the audience will be made of doctors, therapists, and the public, where do you see what you do fitting in with holistic health or integrative health?
Yes. Sorry, what I forgot to also add is that I'm going to talk very broadly about the nutritional intervention as well. But I would say I'm not a nutritionalist and I'm not a nutritional therapist. But I can talk a little bit about what my therapist found when they were considering the intervention. So what I would love to see is the broad spectrum of holistic therapists who are, for example, regulated by the Professional Standards Authority, being more widely used and referred to alongside the conventional treatment which GPs and other practitioners provide. Because I think that they are an underused resource. And when you do have this balance of, a child supported overall by the pediatrician or whoever, but also applying other modalities, I think that this can be very, very helpful for these children. That's certainly what we found in the trial. Parents spoke of a really unmet need for a variety of approaches to try and tackle their health problems. And I think often healthcare professionals are at a loss as to how to help these parents who are really very desperate frequently.
I would agree with that. So I'm asking one last question. So as doing what you do, and you've obviously done it for a number of years now, what do you think is the key to health and healing in what you do?
Oh, that's a very large question.
Personal thought as to what you think makes the most difference.
I wouldn't say any one thing makes the most difference. I think often our approach, our attitude, and that can sometimes be influenced by experience and history. So a lot of the children that I treat come from quite a traumatic history, and it's understanding the influence of that and working out how to manage that that I find very rewarding. And I think that quite often when the parents or the children understand what is going on for them, this can also be extremely healing. So instead of just being at sea with their symptoms, because, for example, ADHD is associated with emotional dysregulation. And so you can have these kind of explosive meltdowns or temper tantrums in families where they come out of nowhere and everybody's really quite damaged by them, but doesn't know how to manage them. So I would use a two-pronged approach, really. One would be to kind of explain that this is an aspect of ADHD. And if you can understand it, then sometimes you can have a level of control over it. But also, when you understand where it comes from, you might be able to, sometimes we can manage to treat it. So, for example, I remember one child who used to just explode at school. He'd been chucked out of school several times. He was a 16-year-old, very, very large lad. When I questioned him, it turned out that what really pressed his buttons was your mum jokes. So they would tease him about his mum. And when I, discussed the family situation, they were a really soft and very, very sentimental family. They would all sit and watch, dog movies and cry. And the remedy that I gave him was really about that kind of softness. It kind of, it's very difficult to describe. It matched that softness, and it kind of gave him a bit of a protective shell, if you like, so that when they then did your mum jokes again. They just stopped affecting him, and within 2 weeks, the school were kind of going, what have you done? You know, this child's just not on our radar anymore. What's changed? So, and I also talked with the mum about this. And with the lad as well, and you know, so with that two-pronged approach, it was really helpful, I think.
Wow, that's great. I think people will learn a lot because we see more and more of ADHD these days.
Yeah, it's true. I don't quite understand why it is increasing so much, but it does seem to be, doesn't it?
Maybe we're just more aware of it, and
I think that's one reason. Yeah, I think that's one reason. But I mean,
talk about technology and things like
yeah,
that.
and it's highly heritable. So, you know, once it's in the family, it doesn't seem to disappear. And, you know, and with the combination of the variety of environmental things that have been implicated, which there are many. So I'll discuss those as well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Because I also think that, you know, we have a public health duty, if you like, because we do know that there are quite a few things that contribute. And if we could work with some of these families before they get pregnant, on kind of understanding, if they do have a history of ADHD in the family, on how to minimize the potential for their child having that. I think there's quite a role for that too.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much, Philippa.
Okay.
So remember, thank you to the audience for listening to this online interview. Remember to get your tickets early now from our website by following the links below. We are the Integrative Health Convention at the Park Plaza Victoria in London on the 5th and 6th of October 2019. You can use the discount code video5, which will give you a 5% discount as a gift from us to you for sharing your time with us. So when we see you in October in London, you get to meet Philippa, myself, and all our other amazing speakers who will be sharing so much more with you then. Thank you. Thanks, Philippa.
Thank you.
Good.